It was probably always street graffiti. But when you had trains that could carry your name through 4 boroughs or 3 boroughs, that was probably the prize for many years. And then we started street bombing, and crack was just so bad it was impossible to get arrested for street bombing. No one took you in for that shit.
So do you think it was easier back then to go all city than now?
100. Well, so there, logistically, right, there were different challenges. There were a million neighborhoods, or not a million, but there were several neighborhoods that you couldn't walk into comfortably because of the crack epidemic. Like being on the east side of Manhattan, like in the triple digits. Like there's dust up there, there's crack up there, there's heroin up there, there's drug dealers up there. Like dudes don't want you making the block hot if they have customers coming in and out all night long. And if you're writing graffiti over there and drawing attention to the spot unnecessarily, someone might fire a shot at you, right? Like been in Long Island City near Queensbridge doing streets when dudes start shooting, in Bed-Stuy while shit starts happening, on Myrtle Avenue while things pop off. And I don't see that with the same frequency today. I'm not suggesting it doesn't happen. It's actually getting to a space where it's seemingly more common now. But back then, so I think in terms of legal, like getting in trouble and getting caught, it was a little bit easier, but I think it was also far more challenging just based on how dangerous shit was. So
what about the buff back then?
Streets or trains?
Streets.
That was not heard of. Like, it's weird. Like when I started doing streets circa 87, 88, there were tags I had in certain pockets that got a 30-year, 28-year run, 20-something year run.
Wow.
And I think about it now and I'm like, you know, like there were a handful of guys that went hard in the last 2 years. None of that shit is there anymore. And the risk versus reward is very different. I don't know if I'd have the determination or even the interest to go that hard on something that wasn't going to last. But they're seriously, like every now and again, someone will be like, dude, this you? And it's a faded Chino tag on like a brick facade somewhere, still running. And I'm like, dude, that's from 88. Like, I don't even know how that's still there. But some of that early street graffiti we did had such a sizable run. So I think that, yeah, there was really no street buff. Like there wasn't an agency involved in cleaning street graffiti. Now you can go across all of these major throughways, 34th Street, 42nd Street, 14th Street, you know, 8th Street, Manhattan Canal, Houston, whatever. There's graffiti, but they'll come through and clean gates and everything is gray the next time I'm through and walls get buffed. I mean, now I think they've got some challenges. I think New York got hit harder since the pandemic started than ever before. I think this is arguably the largest or greatest proliferation of illegal street graffiti that New York has ever seen. You know, like this is, and I'm from a generation of like, we were the first guys kind of strategically targeting main streets and off ramps and, you know, and it was a real strategic thing. Guys like Easy, Jaws, Josh 5, my man TK, my man Shammer, my partner Trim. There were a ton of guys out there bombing, but we were like easily that first wave of strategic graffiti. And, you know, TK had tags in Flatbush forever. And, you know, Jaws had tags running places forever. And there was no buff. I think that most of it either, you know, ended up being eradicated by development. Maybe the building collapsed, someone else took over the business, or it eventually just faded. But there wasn't really any emphasis on cleaning streets back then. They might be able to control it in pockets of New York, but literally wherever there's a hood, it's gonna probably receive less attention than the Upper East Side or some of the more affluent communities in New York. You know, like Brownsville is probably not as pampered as Brooklyn Heights, right? Like there's probably zero graffiti within the confines of Brooklyn Heights. Just because property values are up, there's a greater police presence. And I think their community boards, there might not even be a community board in some of the hoods that we're talking about, right? Like things are just that bad where, and then, you know, you have to pick and choose your battles. If people are firing guns, the spray paint might not be your top priority, right? Yeah. Like it's so easy to, that it makes graffiti a minor infraction compared to some of the life-threatening, like, things going on your community. Or maybe it's the gang presence or something like that that's probably a greater risk for your kid than the graffiti. But you know, sort of like the squeaky wheel gets the oil, I think, in
Yeah,
certain situations. And so, you know, wherever there's going to be an underserved community, I think there's going to always be an abundance of wall space, sadly. And, you know, I think it would be impossible to control it, you know. I don't know. But I think that New York did an amazing job of like putting a fresh coat of paint on the city during the pandemic and when things started to shut down.
Yeah.
But the whole idea of like these challenges, right? There were these small road bumps, like bumps in the road on route to where I wanted to go, and just perpetually trying to figure out how to beat that system or beat that challenge or get over, right? And then there's a certain rush. I think that teen angst, like I was an angry kid, like I was just an angry human being. And, you know, I think that comes a lot with being young sometimes, and all of that youthful angst. This was like the perfect outlet for what I was doing. And it sounds weird because I'm a grown fucking man and I've done so much since graffiti and I've never pulled this card, but I wrote on a lot of shit in the 80s. And there was a small window, maybe the summer of 85, where like we were in the Coney Island yard literally every night for like 2-3 weeks before school started, because we were like, yo, let's just saturate the trains. And on a weekend, I could go to Astoria layup on a Friday night. We'd get there at midnight. We'd fucking bomb till 5:15, 5:30. There was a small routine. We'd get off at Hoyt, walk up to Ditmars, steal some bread and a newspaper and chocolate milk from Frank and Andrew's Deli, jump in Astoria pool, rinse off the ink, go swimming, get back on the train, and we were usually riding the train that we bombed back to Brooklyn. Go home, sleep a couple of hours, go to 45th Street, go to 45th Street on the NRR, 53rd on the NRR, maybe catch 4 sets between those tunnels. And then if we were up for it, go to Bay Parkway or Sheepshead Bay, and then go home, regroup, and hit the Coney Island yard again. And like, that wasn't like, that's not an exaggeration, where I might have been in 1 train yard and 3 layups between Friday and Sunday. And that's what my primary emphasis was. And I see corporate people do it all the time. There's like rage rooms and like sort of smash therapy and things like that, where you're just destroying things and alleviating all of the stress and pressure. And I think in a very strange way, like bombing trains was sort of my version of that, that it was, you know, beyond therapeutic, and it was almost impossible to describe. And there was just something satisfying about taking a drippy tag, in the whole art of it all, strategically placing things high up, large enough so that even if you're not on my side of the carriage, you can see my shit from across the train, and trying to, you know, and it just working in print and branding and, you know, just how things are positioned in advertising. Maybe it was just an early exercise in some of that from what's to come, but it was impossible to explain just how therapeutic maybe writing on 13 trains at 175th on a Friday night might be, right? Coming home exhausted and waking up and being inspired to go do it again. Like being a gym rat, coming home, getting your ass kicked and being beat up and looking forward to running back to the gym the next day, right? So it was sort of that same outlet or relief for me. And I don't know if I would have gotten through my teens. Like I had so much pent up aggression and anger growing up, you know, and like everything in life, you know, you start to address these things, hopefully, and you can get closure on some of the things that are bothering you and start figuring things out. And then obviously with maturity,